I've taken the Sigma 60 to 600mm on a road trip through the Australian Outback. I want to share with you some amazing locations for photography and show you what I loved about shooting with this lens. I'll also share some thoughts about whether the full frame 600mm lens is a better choice compared to micro four thirds alternatives. I'm going to quickly cover the boring techie stuff first, so then we can move on to the interesting bits and share some photos. This is the Sigma 60 to 600mm f4.5 to 6.3 DG DN OS Sport, and you're looking at the L-mount version, which is pretty much identical to the E-mount. So good news for Lumix, Leica, Sigma and Sony users alike. There are switches on the barrel to handle auto versus manual focus, the range limiter, stabilization mode selector, a locking switch to hold the zoom at maximum or minimum extension, and a custom setting switch that integrates with various camera models. This lens extends externally as you zoom. The front of the lens has a very large 105mm filter thread, comes with a Velcro cover that fits over the hood when attached. The included tripod socket is Arca-Swiss friendly, so that's nice. Sigma also make a 150 to 600mm lens, but this design is newer, and I'm told both the autofocus and stabilization are new and improved on previous generations. We're starting this journey in South Australia and the magnificent Ikara National Park, formerly known as Flinders Ranges. This is a modest outcrop of geologically significant rocks. The surrounding landscape is flat and dry, so this small jutting of geology is an oasis in the landscape. It captures just enough rainfall and weather for a range of species to thrive. Plus, it provides microhabitats and shelter for those animals. There's a fair bit of bird life here and a few stunning landscapes to chase at dawn or dusk. The main attraction for me and my Sigma 60 to 600mm is the yellow-footed rock wallaby. Before becoming a photographer, I used to work with the marsupial research team, and that's where my love of the wilderness and wildlife began. And these are such stunning animals. Unlike most macropods, they form colonies and they don't like to move out of that very tight range. That's the problem when invasive species like feral goats start eating them out of their own home. When it comes to photography though, they're very predictable when you know where to find them. These are such peaceful creatures, so wonderfully adapted to the rocky terrain, so elegant, so chilled, and so hard to find. You can be standing right next to one and not realise they're there. The camouflage is magnificent. They like to come out in the mornings and warm up in the sunshine. We can stand on the side of the road with our tripods to support our telephotos and just enjoy a little bit of time with the wallabies. We had our breakfast nearby and compared some of our shots of the wallabies. This was a fabulous morning and all the better with a nice coffee. As if the wallabies weren't special enough, while having breakfast, we enjoyed the company of a few pardalotes watching us from the river gums above. That 600mm reach was just enough to get close to these gorgeous little birds, and I do mean little. Our next stop on this journey is Chorrtcha National Park, to the north of Ikara and west of Alice Springs. For most of my life, this region was known as the West McDonald's. Today, we use the indigenous name instead. At sunrise on the edge of the Larapinta Trail, there's a great lookout with views out to Mount Sonder. It's a beautiful place to watch the sun come up. It's also an ideal place to compare the difference between 600mm and 60mm focal lengths. I put the Sigma lens on a tripod and waited for the first light to hit Mount Sonder. It's pretty wild to have a single lens that can capture the wide open terrain around us, but then zoom right in and magnify the red cliffs of the range. That's just a whole new way to look at landscape photography. But if you know me at all, you know I'm only truly happy when shooting back into the sunlight. Mount Sonder catches the morning light from this lookout, but to the east is Ormiston Gorge and some dramatic limestone formations. I loved having so much flexibility for composition with the 60 to 600. There's a lot to love about watching sunrise from this little spot, and it's literally about 100 metres from the highway. It couldn't be easier to get there. Ormiston Gorge is a great place for photography. You don't have to walk the entire length of the Larapinta Trail. Instead, you can drive into places like Ormiston and just enjoy short walks from the car park. In the month of July, we came across a flock of pink cockatoos, and that was really special for me. I had never seen them in the wild before. One of the listed features on this lens is macro photography. It's not going to get you to 1:1, but it will get you to something like 1 to 3.3. So that's pretty good. And that's achieved at a zoom of 200mm. At that focal length, you're wide open at f5.5. I just feel that a dedicated macro lens will do a better job here. And at Ormiston Gorge, I happen to have a dedicated macro lens on me anyway. Here's a few shots I captured on the Sigma 105 f2.8 macro. This is a great lens, and they make it for both the L-mount and the E-mount as well. There's a really great wildlife park just out of Alice Springs called the Alice Springs Desert Park, and I highly recommend this as a stop for anyone travelling through the Red Centre. The birdlife here is magnificent, plus there's a few macropods and nocturnal marsupials to view that you may struggle to see in the wild. I really like this desert park because there's some stunning flora to enjoy. It's a beautiful walk around the scenery, but also it's a chance to get a really good look at some of the most beautiful birds we have in Australia. In the wild, you usually have to be very lucky to get close enough to see some of these species. This kind of park allows everyone to better understand what lovely creatures are hiding out there in the bush, and hence why we need to protect our wilderness. They're also a great opportunity to get familiar with a telephoto lens. Often people will buy a great lens like this and take it bushwalking, then struggle to get any decent shots. And it's not the lens, it's just that it's really, really hard shooting wildlife in the wild. If you just want to see what the lens can do, if you want to get to know your gear, you might be better off initially to head to something like a zoo or a wildlife park where the animals or birds are tolerant of humans and restricted to an enclosure. It's worth noting that while I walk around this park, I'm shooting handheld with the lens. This is when you really notice the performance of the stabilisation. There's a degree of cooperation between this lens and the built-in stab of the Lumix S5 Mark II. The lens will do the heavy lifting, leaving the camera to fine-tune a little. Our final stage on this journey is going to be in the top end of Australia, in Arnhemland. The climate here is hot and wet. Every summer the landscape floods, filling in the rivers and billabongs. The water recedes slowly over months, revealing new food sources for wildlife and birds. It's a great place to cruise around in a small boat and drift up close to some of the wildlife. Every year when I come here, it's a very different experience. It's never really the same place twice. The first year I came to Arnhemland, the jacana gave me so many great shots, but this year they were really shy. I could barely get a look at them. Another year, the sacred kingfishers were just everywhere, and we got great shots of those. Not this year. But there's always something that pops out to make our day special here. This time it was the black-necked stork, also known as Jabiru by the locals. On this trip, we spent about a half an hour with a female Jabiru fishing for her breakfast in the shallows. And I was very, very happy to have my 600mm lens on a full-frame S5 Mark II. Inside the boat, I had my Sigma mounted to a small tripod, just using it to carry the weight, really. The thing I try to remember when I'm out shooting wildlife is that I may not get every shot that I want out there, but with a lens like this, I'm going to get lots of great shots, and it's going to be a good day. Mount Borrowdale in Arnhemland is a very special place to visit because in addition to some magnificent wildlife encounters, the stone country above the floodplains is home to literally hundreds of ancient rock art sites. Some date back more than 10,000 years. It really is an exceptional location where Indigenous culture and natural wilderness come together. Your choice of camera body will have a big impact when it comes to autofocus performance. But I had the new S5 Mark II with phase detect, and for stills this camera is just amazing. There was a special moment on the billabongs of Arnhemland when we watched terns in the morning light working a patch of water. I've tried to shoot these terns in flight before with DSLR gear and never had a lot of luck, but this time I did. The Sigma and S5 Mark II combo was able to nail the terns as they fly past our boat, maybe 80% of the time. I was amazed, really, really amazed. My companions in the same boat were not having nearly as much fun with their camera setups. So let's keep this one to ourselves, huh? This is a big lens. It weighs 2.5 kilos or 5.5 pounds. Let's compare that to a G9 with a 100 to 400mm lens, delivering effectively 800mm telephoto. That lens weighs only 1 kilo or just over 2 pounds. You can put an entire G9 with the 100 to 400mm in your pack for less waste and space than the Sigma 60 to 600 alone. So is there any real benefit to the full frame option? There was one moment in Arnhemland when one of my companions and I took photos of the exact same kingfisher. He shot his with the Lumix G9 and a 100 to 400mm, and I had the Sigma with the S5 Mark II. He was shooting 20 megapixels with a little more zoom, and I had 24 megapixels with a little more room to crop. So we had two very, very similar perspectives and a chance to compare our photographs at the end of the shoot. What I saw was a little more fine detail from the full frame camera setup. It was better quality. It would want to be, because I worked hard to carry that thing across an entire continent. At the beginning of this journey, I was only just getting to know the Sigma lens and wasn't sure how it would go. It's a lot of effort travelling with a full-frame 600mm lens. But the Australian Outback is rich with inspiration to make this kind of kit worthwhile. Let's flip that around though. If you are planning a journey to chase wildlife in the outback, you'll want some serious gear to make the most of that journey. If you're shooting full frame on a camera like the Lumix S5 Mark II, then this is the lens to deliver results. Yes, the 60 to 600mm is a heavy rig to lug around the outback, but the fact is that autofocus performance is amazing when paired with a camera like the Lumix S5 Mark II. Image quality is gorgeous. You get great bokeh at the longer end of the range, even at f6.3, and it is possible to shoot handheld. The lens stabilization delivers great results too. This lens is the full package. I'm not sure I've ever carried a better telephoto to go shooting wildlife in the outback. Thank you so much for joining me for this video. I hope there was something useful in there for you. If you're new here, then please hit that subscribe button, and I hope to see you all next time.